Welcome to this week's episode of Carren's Couch. Now, I'm super excited actually because we've got Father's Day coming up this Sunday here in Australia, and we've got somebody extra special on the couch with us today. We've got a fellow by the name of Matthew Ames joining us. Now, he's a new author, but his story is incredibly inspiring, incredibly compelling. But I thought it was really potent for Father's Day. Matt and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago before we've gone to air, and we were talking about his experiences, and we were talking about the book and everything that he's gone through, and I'm going to let him share his story with you in just a second. But one of the biggest messages that I got loud and clear from talking to Matt on the phone was what he's discovered about himself as a father as a result of his experiences. You know, for those of us who have had really big, life-changing, world-changing experiences, there's usually a really significant nugget. There's really a piece of gold that we get to take out of those experiences that doesn't only transform ourselves, but has this amazing ripple effect that occurs as a result. And that's really what I wanted to talk to Matt about today. Definitely we're going to hear his story, and we're going to hear about what it is that's transformed not only him but his entire family. So help me welcome Matthew Ames to the couch. Thank you, Matt, for joining us. What a treat to have you on the show.
Thanks, Carren. It's great to be on your show as well.
Well, you know, Matt, I wanted to talk to you about your story. Tell us about your experiences. Tell us about what you've gone through over the last 2 years, because it's relatively new. And for those of our viewers who haven't come across you in the past, enlighten us.
So it was just over 2 years ago now. I was, fairly typical, very busy guy, just 39, not quite 40 at the time, for busy kids, to look after. And I ended up just contracting a sore throat and deteriorated from there. So the sore throat then turned into a fairly, quite a lot of fevers, and deteriorated over a fairly short period of time, and ended up being admitted to hospital and was diagnosed with a strep A infection, and that infection took over my body. I ended up having what they call toxic shock syndrome, where the extremities in my bodies, my arms and my legs, were fairly quickly dying. So the only opportunity that they had to save my life was to remove my limbs. So they took off my left arm on the Friday night, and my remaining 3 limbs on a Saturday night, and they gave me about a 1% chance of getting through that particular surgery. But I'm pretty stubborn, so I'm still here.
Matt, I'm almost speechless. That must have been such a shock for you and your family to hear that that's all, that was all going to go on and so quickly. I mean, there's no time to even think about that or adjust to that.
No, it did happen fairly quickly. I was only in hospital 2 or 3 days before the amputation started. So, and I was in an induced coma for the whole time. So I was in a coma for about 3 weeks. So I woke up to be told kind of what had happened while I was in my coma. So it was a fairly challenging time for me to hear that, and obviously for the family to go through that. So I ended up in intensive care for about 2 months, and hospital for about another 7 months after that. So
how do you come to terms with that news when you wake up and all of a sudden you go from a sore throat to having lost all of your limbs? What was going on for you?
When Diane told me, my wife told me what had happened to me, she was fantastic. She kind of ran through what had happened and why, and answered a lot of the questions that I would have had. And I had a breathing tube in my throat, so I couldn't ask any questions. But I just remember having this overwhelming feeling that because Diane was telling me that it was going to be okay. I did know that I was going to be okay, as long as I had her and the kids around me. That's what I really needed.
Because I can imagine that that would be a fairly isolated experience. Like you would get that sense of loneliness. And I guess that's the contrast to having a doctor deliver news like that versus having your wife deliver news like that. It would have been more reassuring.
Yeah, no, definitely.
What happened after that? You got sent home and then you have to live inside of your home in a completely different experience to what you're used to. How did you make that adjustment?
I think the hospital time was mentally a little bit easier because I had a very clear goal to get home. That was everything that I was sort of driving for, learning to breathe again and, eat again and, sit up. And eventually I got home and I probably was a bit lost for, a few months once I got home because I kind of lost that goal. What was I going to do? Or how was I going to adjust? And life was obviously very different to what it was beforehand. So it took me a while to sort of reframe who I was and what I was there for.
Because you'd gone from a fairly high-powered executive role. Now all of a sudden you're at home. You're still the same, I guess, mentally.
Yeah.
But emotionally, I would imagine you would have been relatively fragile. And the way that you get yourself through each moment is completely different to the way that it was months earlier. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine how that must have transformed your whole way of being, not only inside of your family, but being with yourself and being about yourself.
Yeah, look, I think whilst I was in hospital, I had a lot of time to think to myself, staring at the ceiling and not being able to talk to anybody. I wouldn't recommend the best way to do self-reflection, but I did use that time to really, reframe, my thoughts about myself and what motivated me and why I was what I was there for. So, I think learning that when I find myself in a difficult situation, just using that, slow things down, take the time to kind of reflect and sort myself out has kind of helped me through as well. And also constantly having the support and love of those around me. So, look, there are certainly times where, there have been sad times and, adjustments, but they haven't been as frequent as the doctors and I expected. I remember when I was being released from hospital, I decided, as you do when you're in hospital for 9 months, to go on a holiday. Instead of coming straight home, I went to holiday at the beach for a week.
Right.
And I remember being quite, you're getting quite sad leading up to that holiday, thinking about the things that I wouldn't be able to do. But the actual holiday itself and, reflections afterwards, I did everything that I used to do with the family. I just did it very differently. But I still was able to participate and find out ways of making things happen. So there's always fantastic things you can do. You just have to choose whether or not you're going to focus on things you can't do or focus on the things you can do. And I just seem to be a guy that focuses on the things that I can do, which is for me a much better place to be.
Matt, I find that so incredibly inspiring because I think for those of us that go through such massive experiences, as I said, there's always a gift, there's always a nugget in there. And I think that your attitude of looking at what you can do rather than you can't do is part of what helps you find that nugget of gold, the gift in it.
Yes.
How has it changed the way that you are as a father? Talk to us about that, because I thought that was so profound when we were speaking earlier.
Yeah, I think for me, being a typical bloke, I define myself, I think, by the things that I could do. And, my work was also part of that. And having both my work life and a lot of the things that I could physically do sort of taken away from me had to make me stop and reframe, who am I? What's my value? And it's difficult to explain, but I ended up coming up with, in my mind, I was really defining myself more by who I was rather than what I did. And in that, for me, was the gift of relationships with others. I really firstly defined myself as a husband and a father, a son and a brother and a friend, to amazing people. And that, it actually came to a head when my sister told me I had to be on Twitter to communicate with all these fantastic people, and I had to write the little, description of, who am I on Twitter. So I left it blank for a while, but I ended up writing effectively that.
So who would have thought that Twitter helped you find yourself?
Yeah, it did. It did. I mean, I ended up after that saying, and by the way, I happen to be an engineer, and I don't have any limbs, and a couple other bits and pieces, but the requirement to kind of write, who I was in a couple of lines really made me focus on what was important.
That's amazing that social media has the capacity to do that. I never would have expected that as a response.
Yeah, I don't know if I got much else out of it afterwards, but at least I got that, which is good. Yeah.
So in terms of, the way that, and I think that this show, specifically for our fathers out there who are watching, really this show is an example of how important it is to be at home and how it is important to be there with the kids when they're doing the homework, and how important it is to actually be a part of kids' lives. Because one thing that Matt mentioned to me was that, you're always replaceable at work, but you're not replaceable at home. And that's a real eye-opener and a real experience when you start to look at yourself in terms of who you are rather than what you do. It's a real distinction. And I think that, Matt, your journey that you've gone through to be able to reveal such an incredibly profound revelation about fatherhood is extraordinary. I mean, I was
extremely fortunate to, my wife was, extremely supportive and has, looked after the kids a lot while I was quite busy. And, I kind of knew I was missing out on stuff, but I didn't really understand what I was truly missing out on until I got to kind of experience it much more myself. And, the ability to see the kids much more, help them with their homework, go on school excursions, things that, I just didn't make the time for before. I now know what what was missing out on, and, it's always nice in hindsight to do something different. But I also kind of challenged myself to say it's fine for me because I've learnt through experience and, being forced into that situation. But what would I have said to myself beforehand that would have actually made me change? And I don't know the answer to that, and I think that's the real struggle, that, when people see others who may be, missing out on that kind of stuff, my suggestion would be whatever we can do to increase people's in experience of it firsthand. Leave the kids with their dad for, a weekend, a week, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
I remember when I was, quite busy, my wife was going away for the weekend and was leaving with the 3 kids, and she was quite worried, about leaving the kids with me because I hadn't necessarily had them by myself. We had a great time, and, that weekend I, really bonded with the kids. Dads will do things very differently, and, the mums probably won't be happy with what they do, but, they do it differently, and that's okay.
So what would you be your number one piece of advice that you would give to the dads out there that are watching this show, or even to the mums out there that are watching this show, to help them learn a lesson without having to go through what you've been through? What's the number one suggestion that you would make for our fathers so that they can feel like they are included, that they are a part of our kids' lives, but it also becomes a sense of reward for them that they really want, that they are currently getting only at work but not so much at home? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think my piece of advice would be truly listen to your heart. You know what you need to do, and it's just turning that into action. So, truly follow that, and you'll lead a much more satisfied life, in my view.
And is that how you feel? Are you feeling that your experiences have brought you to feeling a lot more satisfaction in your life and more complete and whole?
Yes, yeah. I always bite on way too much, so I'm sure I'm going to get involved in, and I have been getting involved in other things, but I'm much more conscious now of making sure the priorities are right. And I think that's probably the key thing that I've taken away, is that, we all need to, support the family and, need to be active in lots of different ways. just make sure the priorities are right. Would be my one takeaway.
Well, Matt, I think, as I said just off air, I think you've definitely taken one for the team. And, I think that your experiences are extraordinary and so incredibly unique. But I know that what I'm looking at in front of me is a man who is an extraordinary example of what's possible for all of our dads and for all of us as human beings. So thank you for being you, and thank you for being so open and sharing what you've been through, both physically and emotionally. It's a huge journey that you're on and have been on. And I, for one, here on Carren's Couch, and I know that all of our production team and everybody who's friends with you that is part of Carren's Couch, we are incredibly grateful and incredibly honoured to be a part of your life now. So thank you so much for including us in the ride.
Thanks, Carren. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you very much.
And happy Father's Day to everyone.
Happy Father's Day. Too right. Too right. Thanks, Matt. Much appreciated, my friend.
Yeah, have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
So we've just spoken with Matt, and I don't know about you, but I have this really warm sense of who I am inside of me as a reminder. We get caught up in the day-to-day rewards and the day-to-day achievements and the day-to-day need to produce, that we kind of get lost sometimes with who we actually are as human beings, not only for ourselves but for each other. And for a Father's Day gift, to get this as a reminder from somebody who has found himself on the most profound level, he's found who and what he is for himself and for others, I think that in and of itself is the greatest gift that we can give to ourselves and to give to our family. So I think that Matt has taken one for the team, and I think that his willingness to share his journey with us, man, I think that is, it's almost beyond words, but it is a huge gift to us. So thanks to Matt, and thanks for tuning in. Now, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere, because we've got somebody very special coming up who you know very well on Carren's Corner. So don't go anywhere, stay tuned, and we're going to be right back. Welcome to Carren's Corner, where I have our spunky money man, Pete Audette, and yes, I get to touch him. So we have had heaps and heaps of requests coming in for you guys about how we can start to teach our kids to manage money effectively. And who better to take us down that rabbit hole than Peter Audette, who's our resident money man, but he's also the expert on all things money, savings, debt, investments, all that sort of stuff. So I thought it was going to be a really important Carren's Corner that we talk about today, because we've got a whole generation of kids who are growing up potentially just like their parents. And I was watching a show on telly the other night, and it said that 45% of Australians are living beyond their means, meaning their credit cards are racked up to the hilt, their debt's up to here, and they're well and truly, out of their depths. Now, because we've got kids coming through, are they learning from us, and what on earth are they learning? Because I think it's really important. If there's a cycle that's got to be broken somewhere, we've got to do it. So, Pete, welcome to Carren's Corner once again. So, you've got 100 kids.
A few, yes. A few.
What are you doing with your kids? How are you educating your kids to be money savvy, money smart? Where does a normal person start?
I think it's really, it's very difficult to do. And I don't know that I've got all the perfect answers. So some of it is, some of it's parental, and some of it is from experience.
Do you spoil your kids rotten?
Terribly. And look, I think we all do.
Yeah, everybody does.
One of the problems that we have as a generation is that we're growing up where houses are very expensive, and as a result of that, we're exposed to living beyond our means often. So we often have to dig deep to buy a home. We often have to have periods when we're in debt if we want to take a holiday or we want to do things because so much of our lives are committed to buying a family home. And so when it comes to setting an example for your children, we're not a great example as a society, because it's tough. It's tough to make enough money to make ends meet as it is, let alone to take the time to take a breath and try and tell your children not to do what they're seeing, but to do something else. So I'm not completely convinced I have all the answers. What I can share with you, which is interesting, is I had an incident with one of my children where he would spend everything that he earned very quickly, and then he would get to the end of the week, and if there was no money left, he'd ask me for money.
So you became his piggy bank?
Absolutely.
And how old is this little one?
19.
Oh,
not so
little anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the problem that I think we need to try to resolve inside of our homes, is that we spend everything that we earn. You know, my sister always used to say to me, it doesn't matter what you earn, every time you get a pay rise, you're going to spend it. So really, you may as well not have had the pay rise because you're just blowing your dough. And our kids are doing the same thing. Like your 19-year-old.
So with Liam, sorry Liam for telling the story, but essentially I just said no once.
Yeah.
And that was it. He suddenly fended for himself. And I know from my own experience in our practice that this is a problem that lots of parents have, that whilst ever the door's open financially, people will come and ask for help. And often they're really just waiting for you to say no. And once you do, they'll find another way. So I mean, it's a big problem. Yeah. But sometimes before we start to even work on the next level of educating the children, which we'll get to, that the first thing to do is, if you do have a problem, that the fastest way to stop it is just to say no to start with and deal with the fallout of that first, if you can. And I know families are complex and that's not always easy, but certainly saying yes over and over again will only perpetuate it. Absolutely.
How do we get our kids younger? I remember when I was at school, we had the Commonwealth Bank, which is a bank here in Australia, who used to come into our school when I was in primary school. And they gave us all a bank book, and we would put deposit savings into that account every week.
Yeah.
By the time I was in year 9, I had blown every cent that I'd saved on, going to the movies and, all that sort of stuff. So how do we get our kids younger so that they don't get to the age of 19 and be at a point where they're spending every cent?
I think a really good idea is to do simple goal setting. So rather than getting too complex with it about very long goals, because children are young and emotional and often quite materialistic, rather than fighting the tide, which you'll never do.
Yeah.
Work with it. Set them a goal about something really simple. I want a surfboard. It's $400. It's going to take you 4 months to save up for it. Work with them to save the $400 up. Buy the surfboard. Set the goal. Get the reward. Build the muscles around goal setting and reward for the effort of not just spending all the money on the movies or television or whatever it might be that they're going to do in very short, simple terms. Get them to set a reasonable medium-term goal, and medium-term for children is 3 or 4 months. In fact, that's probably a lifetime for them.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, but give them something where they can go, okay, I cast my mind forward to something I wanted, I put my mind to it, and I got rewarded for it. And then as you get older, the goals are going to be bigger and longer. But the routine's there.
Yeah.
Without that routine, people just get whatever it is that they have, just like Liam did, and spend every cent until there was nothing left. And that we perpetuate that well into our 20s, 30s. Some people just never stop doing it. So I think that's an excellent way of starting.
Because our kids can go from the parents, using the parents as the piggy bank, to the bank as the piggy bank, with credit cards and debt and all of that sort of jazz. I think that's a really great idea, to set your kids goals and start with them really young.
Yeah.
So that, and with pocket money, you think pocket money is a good idea?
Yeah, I think getting a job is an excellent idea.
So for little kids that are too young to get a job, do you think pocket money for chores is a good exchange?
Absolutely.
Get them to unpack the dishwasher, wash the car, vacuum, slave labour.
My father used to make me polish his car,
My dad used to make him Vegemite sandwiches with my pocket money. So set your kids' goals, nice short ones, really little easy ones, so that then they start to feel like they've accomplished something. And I think that sense of reward actually becomes reward in and of itself for that process. I know I've got 2 absolutely gorgeous nephews, and they have had a very similar mindset. Every time it's been their birthdays, we've sent them money. So they've always banked their money because they had nothing to spend it on. But when it came time to buy the iPad, they had the cash there. And when it came time to buy their cars, and the youngest nephew's just bought his first car, he had $8,000 saved towards it, and then my brother kicked in, the extra, I think it was, 5 or whatever. But I think that that's a really good idea. It's a great idea. Set your kids' goals and then work with them to achieve it and keep them focused on the prize so that they keep that excitement going inside.
And keep it short. Don't set a 15-year-old a 12-month goal.
Right.
It's too hard. At that age, especially 15-year-old boys, God, it's too hard. Keep it short and relevant for them and their lives so that they get something meaningful out of it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So that they feel as though they can achieve it. And I think that sense of short-term achievement is something that you can build on. But if you make the first challenge way too difficult, especially at that sort of impressionable age, I don't think you're going to get the traction that you're looking for.
Nice point. Wise one. Wise one. Once again, wise one. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. Take it on board if you've got kids. Let's start to create a different cycle when it comes to money inside of our homes, and it starts with you. You're the parent, you know how to do it, so come on, jump on board. Start teaching your kids to set goals, short-term goals, and then help them achieve them. We're going to see you right here again on Carren's Couch. Don't miss an episode. We love you. Tell everybody you love us. Go to iTunes, make sure that you give us a 5-star rating. Check out Pete's website, which is on the bottom of this show. If you want to know anything more about his company and the services that he offers, make sure you check him out. We'll see you here, same time, same station, next week on Carren's Couch. Bye for now.